Hello, my dear friends. It's me again, Igor Pogodin. And in today's video, we're going to talk about confusion. This is a very important topic. We tend to overestimate our knowledge about the world. Let's be honest. Most of you grew up in a world that places an excessive value on knowledge. You have to know what's happening to you. I need to know what illness I have. You have to know the reason for your conflicts with the people around you. You have to know why you're still not rich, not happy, not healthy, why you don't have close relationships. And there's always this feeling that you're lacking some kind of knowledge, right? If that's the case, then there's no reason not to stay until the very end of the video in order to reconsider this absurd, distorted idea that may well be the main thing warping your life. So we live in a world where knowledge is overrated. Well, it so happened that all of Western culture was built around the key question of human life. What does it mean to know? And what is truth? And what does truth look like? It was probably only in the 20th century, with the emergence of Husserl's phenomenology, that these two branches finally split apart. And by the way, psychotherapy is one of them. The first line, so to speak, is this Western Greek ancient tradition. This tradition was continued by Sigmund Freud in his psychoanalysis. But Gestalt therapy, which I practice, and experiential psychotherapy in particular, followed a different branch. Not what does it mean to know, but what does it mean to be aware? And here lies the key difference. Perhaps the most we can do for a person is to make them anxious. This beautiful, and in my opinion, brilliant phrase belongs to Martin Heidegger, one of the key figures in existentialism and phenomenology, and a student of Edmund Husserl. And after many years of practicing psychotherapy, I am convinced of this every time. So, we live in a world where we constantly want to know something, and it seems to us that we are always lacking some knowledge. Paradoxically, people turn to psychotherapy in order to learn something more, to learn about themselves. But in reality, it's not like that at all. I remember a client, probably 5 or 7 years ago, who said that during the course of psychotherapy, he noticed that he was developing a very strong fear. I asked, what is this fear about? He said, well, it always feels like we're constantly taking off layer after layer of clothing from me. And many people before him said something along the lines of their biggest fear being that during psychotherapy, they might discover something about themselves that they won't like, or that will be very painful for them. And for some reason, most people are afraid of this. I expected this client to answer the same way, but he didn't. This shows how much more advanced he was compared to the earlier clients. He said something like this: what if, after constantly learning about myself, I eventually discover that there is nothing there, and in fact, there really is nothing there. But there's no need to be afraid of that. We are only afraid on the other side of the concept. As long as we cling to and hold on to concepts, we will always feel a hunger for knowledge. Because concepts are so misleading. It's like a kind of demon that has appeared inside you, manifesting itself in the form of constant mental chewing, ongoing mental processes and thoughts that keep attacking you. And you want to understand yourself better here. Many people come to therapy to figure themselves out, to put everything in order. I assure you, that's the last place you should go. Psychotherapy is not meant to give you new knowledge, but to help you exist outside of knowledge. That's the main problem. I don't know how skeptical you are about my words right now, but take a pause here. Our problem is not that we don't know enough, but that we don't accept our own ignorance. Perhaps the greatest thing that can happen in your life is to stop knowing. One of my colleagues, Jacques Bless, the director of the Gestalt Institute in Nantes, even wrote a book called Stop Knowing. He is a phenomenologist by training, and I think that's precisely why he has explored this topic so deeply. But every day when I meet with my clients and group participants, I always encounter the same difficulty. we try to compensate for suffering with knowledge. It won't work. With knowledge, we only intensify our suffering. And not only because, as in that well-known proverbial saying, much knowledge, much sorrow. No. But because this process essentially of accumulating knowledge is a process of feeding concepts. That is, inside you lives a certain gluttonous creature, which you have appointed yourself to be. In other words, you have identified with it and believe that you are it. I call it the self paradigm. It's a certain number, a huge number of concepts for every situation in life with which you have identified and said, this is me. And as long as this gluttonous creature lives inside you, you keep feeding it new knowledge all the time. Are you familiar with this statistic that, give or take, I might be off on the numbers, but the story is roughly this something like maybe 90% of all the information available to humanity right now was created in the last 5 years or two, something like that. Can you imagine what's happening with knowledge? In other words, it's just skyrocketing. 300 or 400 years ago, an educated person of their time could read every book that had ever been written. It was probably, 10 or 20,000 volumes. That's not that many. When I counted how many I'd read, I had already read that many a long time ago, because at some point I was also very hungry for knowledge. My most, my most cherished activity was the following. In the past, in every city, including Minsk, where I lived there, used to be book fairs. Surely, they were always held in big cities, right? That's where all the booksellers would come with their stalls. There would be hundreds of them, and they would set up somewhere, like at a stadium. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Or sometimes they'd set up their books and sell them in some kind of cultural center. So my favorite activity every Sunday was to go to this fair with a huge backpack and a few more bags. I would walk around the market. It would take me 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours, and I would buy books. About 40 kilograms worth. Usually that was anywhere from 10 to 30 books at a time. I would bring them home and I would read them. I managed to keep up with my reading. I read a lot. And all these books answered important questions. How to work with this or that client. I was already practicing psychotherapy by then. How the human psyche is structured, what the patterns are in various disorders, how people establish contact with others, and why they can form close relationships. It was so interesting, so fascinating, but it didn't lead anywhere. Because that path, in and of itself, is a dead end. And at some point, I realized that I would stop reading books that give answers to questions. Friends, the best thing you can do in your life is to stop reading books that answer your questions. Buy and read books that make you think, and attention, to end up feeling lost. Books that raise questions for you. First and foremost, questions about yourself. And in this sense, monographs are radically better than textbooks. But not all monographs are created equal. The most dangerous situation is when the author claims to know something on your behalf. I don't know how you should live your life. I don't know the right way to become a psychotherapist. I say this openly to my students. Maybe that's exactly why we end up with great therapists. I don't steal them from themselves. I don't steal you from yourself. I don't need to do that. That's why my job is to help you become confused and, in a sense, empty. Why? Because confusion is who you are. Confusion and freedom from expectations. But knowledge makes you expect things. Be ready for anything that happens in your life. Everything that happens is in its right place. Allow things to happen. Don't cling to knowledge. Stay in confusion for a while. What happens to you when you stand in confusion? A second, 2, 3. In your head, the question arises, what should I do? What should I do? How should I be? I've often noticed with therapists, especially beginners, though not only them, that when clients come to them and they encounter confusion, they immediately start asking a huge number of questions, fishing for more and more new knowledge. As a result, the anxiety only gets stronger. I remember one supervision session. Some time ago, a young male therapist was working with a female client. And suddenly, at some point, I noticed that he seems to be speeding up, asking more and more and more and more questions. Sometimes we use the format of live supervision, where the therapist can ask the supervisor for help during the session. We agree on this in advance. I myself don't really like to intrude into the session, and I never do it. But if the therapist pauses, then I'm happy to help him figure out what is happening. So I see him looking at me with eyes full of anxiety and fear, and he asks me for supervision. I say, "What's going on with you? Tell me." And he starts describing to me the turmoil inside, that he doesn't know what to do, where to go next, and all sorts of nonsense that's supposed to be resolved by some new knowledge. He comes to me, "Give me the knowledge. What should I do?" I say, "Let's take a better look at what's happening with you right now." He says, "I'm confused." I say, "Wonderful. This is a wonderful place." He says, "But it's unbearable." I say, "I know. But it's precisely in this confusion that something truly new appears. In this confusion, something emerges that wasn't there before. If any knowledge arises in this confusion, it's new, and it disappears immediately, like the lotuses that bloomed where the Buddha stepped. It's the same here. Let the confusion be," I tell him. And we talked about what makes his confusion itself so unbearable for him. About the nature of his fear, his anxiety. And in the end, he starts to breathe more deeply and says, "Yes, this is important. I feel calm inside. I feel comfortable inside." He returns to the session and admits his confusion to his client. And for several minutes, there is deep work taking place, during which interventions arise that even surprise him, and suddenly there is another pause. And he starts to speed up again. What appears? Confusion again. Once again, it is unbearable for him. That's normal. It's hard to be in a state of confusion. Is it easy for you to be confused? No, it isn't, right? When you find yourself in emptiness and not knowing what will happen next, not knowing how to be. Uncertainty is your nature. You don't want to be yourself, you push it away. You try to compensate with knowledge. You try to build a reinforced concrete structure on top of it to feel protected. As a result, your fear only grows stronger because you remain, just as you were before, a small, insignificant nobody inside your own mind. Is that fair? You try to put on chainmail and armor, a shield of knowledge, while inside you stay the same small and worthless person. Is that fair to you? No. You are not this character. You are the character who only appears when confused. So give him the chance to appear. Give yourself the opportunity to be confused. Anxiety and fear will show up there. That's normal. Anxiety and fear arise in confusion only because you are on this side of the concept. You are convinced that you are the concept, so when you find yourself confused, it's unfamiliar territory for you. You don't know how to handle it, but it doesn't need to be handled. It just needs to be allowed to exist. And if you listen to yourself while you're confused, a miracle will happen. Something will begin to appear that wasn't there before. Descartes, and after him Mamardashvili, have a wonderful definition of a miracle. A miracle is something that shouldn't exist, but it does. Mamardashvili and Descartes were talking about thought, but now extrapolate this to any manifestation of life. As soon as you find yourself confused, there you are, facing a situation where you want to know all the answers. Stop. Admit that you don't know the answers. Allow yourself to be confused and be present in that state. And you'll be surprised that in this moment, feelings will arise that you didn't even suspect existed in this context. Thoughts will appear that never came to you before. Observations. You will see things you hadn't seen before. Suddenly, something will catch your eye out of confusion, from the space of confusion. Why? Because confusion is the doorway to your true nature. And that's when the real magic happens, when you discover that you actually have so much within you that is always there. Love, tolerance, gratitude, wisdom. Something inside you knows how to live. So, if you stop trying to know everything, you will. Pay attention, friends, become more effective. Because some people say, but how? If I go through confusion, I'll just be drifting around like a log in the water. No, that's not true. You'll actually be much more effective. Because in the present moment, nothing will distract you. You won't be trying to answer the questions, what should I do? Or what am I missing? you'll simply take the most effective action. The most effective actions come from here, from the present moment, from being present in it, from confusion. To stop knowing that's the challenge you're facing, and it's a crucial one. And alongside this process, if you follow this path, you'll find that you have no need to know things for other people. I only truly became a decent therapist when I stopped knowing things for my clients. Who am I? Do you remember what the main point was? You specifically appointed me to take on the important role of being the avatar, or the living embodiment of your true inner master, your real teacher, the one who guides you from within. This true teacher simply manifested in this form. And at that moment, of course, you connect with it to a greater extent. You don't fill the air with constant radio noise. You allow yourself to simply pause. There are fewer thoughts, and your actions become more effective. There is less anxiety and more love. The urge to fight with other people, with life diminishes, and there is more tolerance and acceptance. Not because you studied it, but because it happens naturally. That is your true nature. You don't need to change anyone, because everything is in its place. Everything fits. And entirely new reactions and feelings appear you didn't know before. New desires arise, ones you had forgotten about or never knew existed, but you are not dependent on them either. They don't linger long in your life. They all come and go just fine. Simply be present and observe what is happening to you, remaining empty and bewildered. Try it. It's wonderful. Only in bewilderment will there be space for what is truly, genuinely, and authentically deep within you. As you watch this video, ask yourself a question. Are you watching it, once again, to understand something or to encounter something within yourself? Don't try to understand anything. Allow yourself the opportunity to get to know yourself as this video goes on. It's just like a radio that talks, accompanying your process of getting acquainted with yourself. Who are you? Who am I? And what am I curious about regarding myself? And what makes my life interesting to me? And what in my life is interesting to me? And by being present in it, you settle into this. Give yourself the chance to be fully present. Open your heart. Allow all the feelings that arise to be present. Great. To all. Don't filter anything. Everything is wonderful. Everything is in its right place. Everything will happen on its own. What you don't need will leave. What you need will remain. You won't be dependent on anything. Life becomes fluid, though it has always been fluid. It's just that before, you suffered because of it. But now you are surprised and accepting. And more, you discover new things about yourself. But only if you stop trying to understand me. What did Igor say? You don't need to retell anything. You don't need to retell this video to your friends. You need to touch it with your heart and see what kind of response it evokes in that heart. The answers are there, inside you. Not with me, not in my mouth. Words lie. I deceive you all the time when I say forgive me. But what is inside you, when you hear me, cannot deceive you. Don't draw conclusions. Just open your heart. Just listen to yourself. And then, at some point, quietly, you will hear my voice inside. Welcome back. Welcome home. Thank you, my dear ones, for watching this video to the end. I am very grateful for that. It means that you care about your life. That's wonderful. Leave your comments, give your reactions, likes, or ignore it if you didn't like it. Share this video with your friends, acquaintances, and come to our programs. As usual, I will leave a link to our website in the program description. Maybe you'll be interested in how, with our help, you can move forward in exploring yourself much faster. But if you decide to continue on your own, I'm still keeping an eye on you, so you can still rely on me. This was Igor Pogodin with you. See you in the next video. Bye.